Hi, Noshers. My name is Micah, the host of Not Your Bubbe's Nosh, a conversation about your favorite and least favorite Jewish foods, your go-to source for holiday meal inspiration, and a place to discuss and kvetch about which Bubbe made it best. Hi, Noshers, and welcome to another episode of Not Your Bubbe's Nosh, my food podcast all about Jewish food, my favorite topic to talk about, where we chat about whose matzo balls are best, how do they float, how do they sink, and everything in between. And today we are joined by a very special guest, someone that I personally fangirl over. You'll hear about that quite a bit. And if you want, you can count the number of times I say fangirl in today's episode because it's embarrassing, and DM me the number and just watch me die of embarrassment. Anyways, so we are joined today by Amy Albertson. She is a Jewish advocate and educator in California. Through her online activism, public speaking, and workshops, Amy empowers young Jews to be unapologetically Jewish, both online and in their everyday lives. She lived in Israel for over 6 years, where she created the Asian Israeli, cataloging her experience as a Chinese American Jewish woman. Amy has been an active voice in the Jewish community for over 10 years, since her days as president of Hillel and co-founder of Israel Group on campus at Portland State University. And she also completed an internship in Tel Aviv on a Masa Israel program. She made Aliyah in 2015 and dedicated her career to working for Jewish nonprofits. She's also the recipient of Women's International Zionist Organization Warrior for Israel Award. She is a big deal. She has been published in the Times of Israel, Hey Alma, the Jewish Journal, as well as featured in Jerusalem Post, the JTA, and on numerous podcasts. And she's also highlighted in Ben Freeman's book, Jewish Pride, Rebuilding a People. And that is someone I am also fangirling over. So definitely check Amy out. Her and I will chat about everything from Jewish food to Chinese food to how to be Jewish online and what happens when you receive negative feedback. Besides being an all-around amazing person, she loves the beach, being a dog mom, and she is ridiculously hilarious. So please follow her at the Amy Albertson and enjoy our conversation. Hi, Amy. It is so nice to have you on the podcast today. I'm so excited to chat with you. I have been a fangirl of yours on Instagram. You post the most amazing and informative and sometimes funny advocacy and rights for Jewish people and Israel itself. And I think that you are just a wealth of information, not only on Instagram, but here in real life, or at least through the screen. So I'm so excited to chat with you today. I'm like verklempt.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I'm really honored that you invited me onto the podcast.
Yeah, so we'll get right into it because I hope by now everyone has creeped your Instagram, website, everything on social media so they know all about you. But I want to learn a little bit about your upbringing in the Jewish community and community at large. Tell me, what was that like for you growing up?
Sure. So I have what I would call a pretty unorthodox, to be a little punny, an unorthodox sort of Jewish upbringing. I didn't really have such a Jewish upbringing. I am from a mixed family. So my mom is Chinese American and my dad is, pretty average Ashkenazi American Jewish guy from the Valley in Southern California. And my parents were just very open to me exploring everything. I always knew that I was Jewish and Chinese. Like if someone asked me like, oh, what are you? That's how I answered. I'm half Jewish and half Chinese, although I do not use the terms half anymore, which we can talk about. But yeah, it was very loose. It was very cultural. We did things like Hanukkah and Passover, but they were very cultural and not religious because my dad's mom, my paternal grandmother, she is Jewish, but she's like a self-proclaimed atheist. And she's like very, being Jewish is important to her and like the culture is important, but she's really not into religion. So we would do Passover, no Haggadah, things like this. And so I grew up with like a pretty loose understanding of who the Jewish people were or what it meant to be Jewish. I knew Israel existed and that it was a Jewish country, but that was all. I didn't know it was controversial. Yeah, it was a pretty loose Jewish upbringing, you could say. I went to Shabbat, but I didn't know it was Shabbat. Things like this would happen. I didn't learn Hebrew. I didn't grow up with a Hebrew name. I didn't have a bat mitzvah, even though it was offered to me. I didn't know what it was. So I said no, not knowing about the party aspect.
That's the best part. It's the best part.
So it was a very loose upbringing. And it wasn't until I was in high school, which ironically I went to Catholic high school, that I started to have an interest in exploring my Jewish roots.
So interesting. And I think that's very common for a lot of people in our generation of we celebrate the holidays, but we don't always know what we're celebrating necessarily. And we're very much assimilated in the community that we're growing up with, no matter what community that is. And I want to touch on what you said about half, because I know that that's a big part of your content and you are very outspoken about that. And I think that your viewpoint on that hits it right on the head. And I would love for you to share that with the audience.
Sure. So I used to always say I'm half Jewish and half Chinese. And then as I started to grow in my Jewish identity, I realized that part of the reason that I would use the term half is because I didn't feel legitimate enough. I was kind of delegitimizing myself as a Jewish person, like, oh, I'm just Jewish, or, only my dad is Jewish, or I didn't grow up in going to Hebrew day school and all of these other things that other people did. But it really wasn't accurate to how I felt about myself. Like, I'm Jewish. I made Aliyah and I lived in Israel for 6 years. It's not about who knows the most stuff, but like I have taken it upon myself as an adult to learn so much about our traditions, about our people, about all these things. And I feel just as Jewish as someone with a Jewish mom or people who have two Jewish parents. And I participate in Jewish life with them on an equal level. And so I kind of just decided to stop using that term because for some people, it makes them feel more comfortable. That's fine. For me, it was about, I was diminishing myself. So I decided to stop using it.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And it goes in hand with what I try to do and say is, well, it's like if you're drinking water out of a wine glass on a Friday night, like it's Shabbat enough. And it doesn't have to be what our grandparents maybe thought Jewish was. And times have changed. There's so many interfaith couples out there. There's lots of younger people who don't feel one way or another, or they do feel very Jewish, but then if their mom's not Jewish, they don't feel like they should feel that Jewish. And there's so many things up in the air for a lot of people. And I hope that if people get anything from this is that if you feel Jewish and you connect to it, then like you're Jewish. Like that's great. And
yeah, I think it's interesting that our traditions, they say a lot of things, but like you said, it's what, 2023 now, and the world is a complicated place, and our people have always kind of ebbed and flowed with our circumstances. And I think that's something to be considered. So, part of the product of being a diasporic people is mixing. And, obviously I think traditions and beliefs and our culture needs to be preserved to a certain extent. But one thing that I don't agree with, at least that I don't think helps necessarily preserve our culture is, delegitimizing people who are part of us just as much as other people, and gatekeeping them. Because then they want to disassociate completely and we end up losing them. And I think that's way worse.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, there's not that many of us to start out with. So we got to keep as many as we can interested and included and feeling like they have a place with Jewish people all over the world. So I love that you are so vocal about that and you share that and you share your experience. And I think it's really cool. But this is also a food podcast. So we should probably talk a little bit about food. So growing up in a Chinese Jewish American household, what did holidays look like for you? What were you eating? Traditional kind of Ashkenazi matzo ball soup and Passover Seder things? Where do you incorporate different elements of your mom's heritage? What did that look like?
So it's really interesting because I think for both of my cultures, both being like my Chinese American side, we're very American. We're like, I'm third and fourth generation American. And then I'm third generation on the Jewish side as well. So we're very American, but food, I think, is one of the biggest ways that we engage with our culture on both sides. You know, like with my Chinese family, it's like if we're doing something, like the most Chinese thing we probably do is like go eat Chinese food. Like for Chinese New Year, we eat Chinese food. That's what we do. We get together and we eat Chinese food. And with my Jewish side, Jewish food was also the culture that I knew kind of the most, even though I didn't really know it all in the correct way, you could say. So for example, I grew up eating matzah bread, but I knew that matzah was like a Jewish food, but I didn't know about that it was like significant to Passover and that during Passover, we don't eat like leavened bread. I knew we ate matzah on Passover because of the story of Passover and that we didn't have time to let the bread rise. But I didn't know that Jews refrained from eating bread during Passover. And I didn't know that most Jews do not eat matzah not during Passover.
I would argue that a lot of us do.
Really? So yeah, like maybe it's just in Israel because people like are so sick of matzah, but yeah, so like matzah bread was like a thing that we ate whenever we kind of felt like it, or a lot of times I would eat it like at my grandma's because that's my Jewish grandma. And I'd be like, let's make matzah bread. And I knew it was a Jewish food, or, you know, bagels, of course, very Jewish American staple, growing up with bagels and lox and cream cheese. And I knew that we ate bagels and I knew that we were picky about bagels. And I knew that we had preferences about our bagels because we were Jewish and that was a Jewish thing. And, you know, I was exposed to a lot of other Jewish deli and things like this through my grandma. And yeah, so I think food is like one of the main ways that I even engaged with my Jewishness growing up.
We eat matzah all year round. Matzah is our favorite snack, but maybe that's why I'm always constipated. Anyways, I think that's interesting because you knew that things were Jewish, but not always the history behind it. And even just having those foods themselves are foods your non-Jewish friends likely didn't know about. And to eat it all year round, I think is still pretty fun and connects you to the culture and whatnot. But you lived in Israel for a number of years, for 6 years, you said, right?
Yeah.
And so how did that shape your view on Jewish food / Israeli food?
Israeli food is the best food. It's so good. But what really, Israel really shaped and helped develop my understanding and view of the Jewish people, and food is a big way that you engage with that. Again, is just the different cultures, the different Jewish cultures, the different traditions, the different foods that come with that. Like I never, to my knowledge, before I went to Israel, had like Sephardi or Mizrahi Jewish food, which some might argue is I mean, I can handle some spice and I love spice. So I really like that food. And that was stuff that I wasn't really exposed to, growing up or even in my early adulthood when I was exploring a lot more Jewish stuff. I wasn't exposed to it until I went to Israel. And so Israel just kind of opened up my palette to engaging with new Jewish cultures through new Jewish food.
Yeah. And did you have a favorite food while you were there? I know that's probably a loaded question, hard-hitting question.
I mean, everything is so good. I mean, so first of all, like putting tahina or tahini or however you say it in English on everything, which was something I learned in Israel, like how to mix it from the raw tahina. I really love Moroccan fish. Like cooked in the red sauce. That was like one of my favorite things. Something I still make occasionally is petitim or like Israeli couscous. That was something I learned to make and eat a lot. And then also Temani or Yemenite soup. So good. I had a friend. Well, I should say I have a friend. She's still my friend. I have a friend, Sophie, and her family is Yemenite and they live on this little moshav in the south. And her grandma just would always make like such delicious Yemenite soup and I would go to the moshav and visit and it was just like the best.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to Israel in 10 days,
Wow.
12 days, 13 days, in a number of days. And I am just so excited to eat everything in sight.
Everything is just so flavorful and fresh and exciting. I don't know why. I mean, maybe it's just in my head, but like, I swear the food tastes better.
I just like want to turn into a falafel.
Yeah.
And come home perfectly like crisp on it won't be warm, but if I could be a falafel, green on the inside, crisp on the outside, smothered in tahina, I'd like that to be me when I get off the plane back in San Francisco.
Yes.
So excited. I've made all my dinner reservations and I've not been ever as an adult. I've only been as a teen.
Oh, wow.
I'm excited to be an adult. And exploring. And while living in Israel, though, you had this amazing experience of making aliyah, which is, I think, something that my husband and I talk about at least twice a week. But we don't have the beitzim to do it at this time. But you created the Asian Israeli, which shared your experience as well living there. And I would love to learn about your, I guess, takeaway messages, or if you had a couple take home things that you really learned or would like to share from that 6 years of life. Distill it down to 2 sentences now.
Sure. Living in Israel, especially for Americans or people who make aliyah for what I would call like more ideological reasons, right? Like, I mean, it can be debated, but you're generally not going for like, it's not a necessity, right? We're not Ukrainian refugees or Ethiopian refugees. We can, although it's debated, stay and exist and live in America. We can get jobs. We can support ourselves, these kinds of things. So moving to Israel is definitely a choice that you make. And it is hard. It's hard to live there. I didn't have any family there. And that was really hard for me. I learned to be so independent. I also really learned, we call it in Hebrew, lizrom, to flow. So, if you're a female, you are zolemet. And I learned to be so zolemet, like to go with the flow. Nothing affects me, but I just like something happens and I'm like, okay, this is happening. What are we doing about it? Like, I just became very go with the flow. And that's something I definitely learned from being in Israel, I think. I also learned how to navigate bureaucracy a lot, which has helped me because America does have a lot of bureaucracy. I think I just didn't realize it as much until I engaged with it in Israel. And it's less difficult here because it's in English, but it's just as bad, I think. And, but Israel really taught me to have a tough skin when it came to that. And Also just joy. I think Israelis live in such a joyful way, even with lots of hard things going on. And I learned, like the only things that are life and death are life and death. And everything else is not, in which case, like, we don't need to be getting so upset and we need to find the joyful moments and like live with joy. And I think Israelis are really good at that.
It's really nice. And there is definitely bureaucracy here. I immigrated here. I moved here 2.5 years ago. And I feel like there's been a lot of lines.
Oh, for sure.
And hoops I've had to go through, even just to get my driver's license as a Canadian. So there's things going on. And I know that I get it probably the easiest out of most because I'm a Canadian and there's so many reciprocities, but even still. And besides the food of Israel, obviously, is there anything that you really miss?
It's funny because people always ask me, what do you miss the most about Israel? And I'm like, the food and then certain people, like my friends. I miss my friends a lot. I'm like, move back to America. Like, I don't want to encourage people to leave Israel necessarily, but I'm like, for selfish reasons, move back to America. But yeah, definitely the top two things I miss are food and people.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there one product from Israel that I should A, bring back, and B, bring back to give to you when we meet in person? What's one item at a grocery store or something that I can bring back?
I mean, I guess like good tahina. Just a thing of tahina. That's my favorite. And you can find it, like if you go to like certain niche kosher grocery stores, or like there's like a kosher store in Oakland that has a lot of Israeli products. You probably know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They have a lot of Israeli products, but I don't, go there often. And then, I guess that's mostly it. And maybe like halva from Halva Kingdom.
Halva Kingdom. I'm writing this down.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Halva Kingdom. You'll see it. It's everywhere now. It's in the shuk. It's in every shuk. It's like, I think they even have it in some of the malls and stuff. They've really grown.
Okay.
And they have like all these different flavors of halva, which I love halva. That was like another thing growing up. That was like at the Jewish deli that I grew up with. I used to play this trick on my dad, and I told him as an adult that I would do this. But my grandma, we would go to this Jewish deli in Berkeley. My grandma lives in Berkeley, and every single time I'd be like, oh, we should get something for dad. And she would say, what should we get him? And I'd say, let's get him halva. My dad doesn't really like halva that much. So every time I would bring it home, I'd be like, Dad, I got you this halva. And he'd be like, oh, that's okay. You can have it. And I knew that he would say that, which is why every time I was like, let's get halva, because really I knew that he was just going to give it to me and I was going to get to eat it.
I love that. What kind of halva is your fave?
I mean, I don't even know what we used to get at the deli was just like regular, like flavored. Mm-hmm. I am a sucker for anything chocolate. So like when it has really good chocolate, but honestly, just like a classic halva flavor, I think is good. And in Israel, they have halva flavored ice cream.
That sounds amazing. I'm absolutely going to bring you back a little piece of Halva Kingdom.
Oh my gosh.
And entice you to the city.
Yes.
To eat it with me. I just made a halva milkshake, like a boozy halva milkshake. I'm writing a cookbook and it's one of my drinks in the cookbook. So it's a boozy halva milkshake.
Yum.
And usually you don't like to eat what you take pictures of because it like sits there and gets icky and like everyone's fingers are in it all the time when you're taking photos. But that wasn't the case for this one. It was chef's kiss. I'll send you the recipe. You can make it with the halva.
Yeah, that sounds delicious.
Halva everything. It's probably in like 30% of my recipes in this book. It's basically just a halva book at this point.
It sounds like the cookbook for me. I love halva.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I have a lot in my cupboard, but Halva Kingdom, I got you. Anyways, outside of Israel, now that you're home in the States, or in this home, I guess, in the States, because that was also home to you likely. I know on your Instagram, sometimes you've posted with like friends or yourself, how you meld the two parts of your cultures together when it comes to food. So like a ginger matzo ball soup or like dim sum brunch activities for Shabbat. Like, tell me more about how you put those two cultures together, if you do, or if there's like combinations that you're like, man, this would be the perfect Chinese Jewish dish.
Luckily, there's a lot of overlap. Like Chinese and Jewish immigrants kind of came in similar times and lived in similar situations, circumstances and areas. And so there's a lot of overlap, and like Jews have a great affinity for Chinese food. So it's kind of easy in that way. You know, things like, oh, I eat Chinese food on Christmas because I'm Jewish, but also because I'm Chinese, or things like this. The things like the miso, ginger, matzo ball soup, fusion and things like that have been happening since I moved back. There's an organization called Lunar, which is an organization of kind of like for Asian Jews. And we get together. Sometimes there's a group of us in the Bay Area, and we always kind of like meld Asian culture and Jewish culture. So we have hot pot Shabbats, and we had like a Hanukkah Shabbat. It was technically before Hanukkah, but it was Shabbat right before Hanukkah. And someone made latkes with Japanese leeks and white pepper instead of black pepper. And they were so good. I think food is really at least one of the souls, or a big chunk of the soul of Judaism and Jewish culture. And food is very centric also to a lot of Asian culture. You know, there's a lot of symbolic foods. I think it just lends really well to blending the culture. And like I said before, food is one of the biggest ways I engage with both of my cultures. So being able to kind of mix them is really fun and interesting.
Yeah. I mean, they both sounded delicious. Absolutely delicious. I might have to make some. Yeah, I don't know. They sounded great. They looked great.
I think also she may have used panko crumbs in the latkes. I made some this year with green onion instead of like yellow or white onion. And that was really good also.
I love that. And I think for myself, at least while I've been doing research for my book, it's a plant-based Jewish cookbook, which makes sense considering that's what I do. It would be a little weird if I wrote much else, but I was experimenting with like different latkes this year, and I made one actually that was like inspired by Persian tahdig, like the rice dish. And so I wanted it to be a latke alternative. And so I used sushi rice that I cooked with like saffron and stuff like that. And then I fried those into patties.
Yum.
And then it made like a little cucumber salad topping. But I think, like you said, with Judaism, and because Judaism itself spreads so far and wide across the globe, and I think Jews are really good at adapting, right? Like we make what's around us work with our lifestyle and with our traditions and values and whatnot. I think that food is one of those things that it's so diverse in the world. And I think that people forget that it's not just matzo balls and gefilte fish. It's actually like really flavorful stuff like the Moroccan fish stew as well, which I made a recipe using cauliflower instead of fish because cauliflower is king in all cultures lately. But it can be so much more than fried schmaltzy, chickeny matzo balls, which also have their place. I had matzo ball soup last night, but I had made like a little turmeric broth thing.
Yum.
And it was great. And then I was eating leftovers. So then I had like pita and challah and lots of bread, but it's just so much more. And I think it's fun to be able to make it a modern, but also be fit in with other parts of what make us us. So yeah, if you ever need a place for someone to host your meals, you can always come to my house and make hot pot Shabbat. I will participate.
Sure.
I'm not Asian Jewish, but I just love to eat.
It's funny because my fiance is also not Jewish, and he's not Asian. He's not Asian or Jewish. And he's not Asian and Jewish. But every time I go to like the Asian Jewish Shabbat, he's like, when are we going to have one when I can come? So I was like asking him, like, when are we going to have our like and friends or like and mixed people? And it's not that they're not allowed. It's just like nice that we have that space. Totally. And it's like our time together. But yeah, I think we definitely need to host a like immersion Shabbat of some sort.
Yeah, I've been threatening this year to do monthly one table Shabbats. And I want to do it with like different groups of people and like use it as a great way to meet new people. So maybe we can host one where it's like a fusion Asian Jewish fusion Shabbat where we can make hot pot and we can pop some matzah balls in the hot pot on a Friday night. And that would be fun. Stay tuned. So I would like you to give me, outside of the food stuff, a little elevator pitch of what you do for work because it's so interesting. And I want to talk a little bit about that because you have such a unique and important perspective on so many things in general. So here's your elevator pitch.
Okay. So my elevator pitch for work, it's a little complicated because I kind of have two sides of what I do. So one thing that I do that I guess I would call kind of my day job is I'm a social media strategist. I'm a freelancer. I currently work with At the Well Project, which is a well-being organization with everything based in Jewish wisdom for women and non-binary folks. And that's really amazing. It's a great team. We're an all-woman team. Not on purpose necessarily, but it just happens to be that way. And it's very nice. And I learn new Jewish things every day. And then I also have my Instagram and my online presence, which leads me to doing, talks and workshops around mostly with teens and young adults, talking about Jewish pride and like how we can be unapologetically Jewish and about being positive and proactive in our Jewish expression versus being reactive. And that's kind of what I do. That's my job, I guess.
I love it. And you've been like a big voice, at least on my feed and in my mind, in the Jewish community. And we already know that I'm a fangirl, but especially for younger people. And if I think back to myself, especially when I was a teen going through BBYO but being in a high school where there weren't very many Jewish people and encountering anti-Semitism, it's so important to have someone to guide and help you, but also someone who's closer in age to you. So you feel like you can talk to them about different things and you see yourself in them and you see that you can become unapologetically Jewish as well in your adulthood. I cannot say words today.
It's a hard word.
So especially for young listeners or young adults, what are, I guess, your top few ways to get involved or actionable tips to become micro advocates for Judaism and Jewish pride? What are some things that we can do?
I think it's about starting small. So a lot of people are like, wow, I wish I could do what you do, which first of all, you can do what I do. Everyone can do it. Everyone has a voice. You can use it. You can promote yourself, but not everyone needs to. And I don't think everyone needs to feel compelled to be that way. But just, there's like this phrase that goes around in the Jewish advocacy world that existence is resistance. And I think that just living out your Jewish life and your Jewish truth is so powerful in its own way. And so it's really small. It can be small things. One example that I give all the time to students is, you go to school on Monday and people ask, what did you do this weekend? And let's say that you went to Shabbat dinner. You can say to them, oh, I had dinner with my family. Or you can say to them, I had Shabbat dinner with my family. And they're going to ask you, oh, what's Shabbat? Or they'll say, oh, Shabbat, I've heard of that. That's like a Jewish thing, right? And now you've opened up a conversation to talk about something Jewish that's amazing. Like Shabbat is great. What's not to love about Shabbat? And you've just opened that conversation to a person who might not know about it. And now they're going to learn about it. And if you ask me, the ultimate goal of that conversation is you're going to invite them to Shabbat and they're going to experience it for themselves. But, baby steps. But I think it's just these little things and that's like being unapologetic, right? It's like, oh, I could choose to hide that I went to Shabbat and just say I went to dinner and like, that can be it. But why would you do that? Just, you went to Shabbat. That's what you did. You're just stating a fact. And there's always the fear of anti-Semitism. But I think that one thing about anti-Semitism is a lot of people have anti-Semitic thoughts or feelings, what do you call it? It's like unknowingly, because they exist in a society that has been guided by so much anti-Semitism. So they might think things about Jews and they don't know that they know a Jewish person, or they either don't know a Jewish person, have never met a Jewish person, or unknowingly know Jewish people. So exposing them to Jewish people and making them understand, like, we're just another culture like everyone else. We have our own unique culture and it's not weird. We're not doing weird magic. We don't have horns. We're not eating babies. Like, there's nothing nefarious going on here.
We're literally having family dinner on Friday.
Yeah. Like, we're having chicken. We're eating chicken and soup with little balls in it. Like, it's not anything too crazy. I think that's really important, like exposing people to us as regular humans is really important. And I think that's like a small thing that you can do, it's just like being.
Mm-hmm. And you are so much online these days, as someone who's also online, which makes me sound like I'm my mother when I say that. But being online, there's so much, I just call it garbage out there, where it just makes you feel like absolute trash can at the end of the day. When you see something that's anti-Semitic, or you get a comment or a message, or you see a friend post something that you feel uncomfortable with, what's your strategy or tip for someone who experiences that or sees that even secondhand online, especially on social media?
There's different levels to it. I generally try to assess the situation as, okay, what is going to happen if I say something right now? Is that going to convince this person of anything? If the answer is no, then I just ignore it. If I get mean comments, generally I just ignore them and block them, because I know that the person is not there to engage and learn. If it's something where I see that someone might be willing to engage, or that a lesson can be taught to maybe other people around, I might engage with them. In the case of like friends posting things that are anti-Semitic or against Israel, depending on the friend and their track record of what they post, I will probably say something like, hey, like that account is this, or like something like that. Just like bringing it up to their attention. And then it's up to them to react in a certain way. And sometimes, I've definitely lost friends over the issue of Israel or anti-Semitism, which is sad. But at the end of the day, if someone isn't going to listen to Jewish people about what is anti-Semitic, and they're going to just like double down on it, then that's not a person who's my friend, because anti-Semitism is like a genuine, real problem. And it's sad, but it happens. And I think it's something that we have to come to terms with.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's good advice, because if we were to respond to everything we saw all the time, we would be glued to our phones, probably crying in a dark closet every day.
Oh, yes.
Because and sometimes I go through the same motions of like, if they're not there to learn or to engage. And I mean, let's be honest, you post a lot of informative and thought-provoking content. I post Jewish food. I post Jewish food of different types, and like usually healthy Jewish food. So like usually when somebody comments on my stuff, I'm like, this isn't the place to do that, first of all. And second of all, I'm literally making hummus. Give me a break.
So controversial.
I know, like it is actually quite controversial, but
hummus is very controversial.
But at the same time, like you can't convince someone, or you can't share. If someone's not willing to listen, they're not willing to learn either. So it's an interesting place, that online social media.
Definitely.
And I think,
yeah. And I think another thing that's really important is taking breaks and removing yourself from, if you were in a room where everyone was making you feel bad, you would remove yourself from that room. And so that's kind of the same thing with social media. It's like, you have to protect yourself, and it's just social media is not important enough it's like not the hill to die on. If it's too much for you, don't do it. If it's making you feel bad, get off of social media. That's what I really think. And I take breaks. I try not to go on social media on Shabbat just to like have those breathers. When there's like big escalations and it's just, you're being bombarded with so much negative information and all of that, I definitely check in with myself. Like when I'm starting to feel anxious or stressed about it, and will like sign off and just like take a break because, you have to protect your mental health for sure.
Absolutely. And also you find people who are posting content that makes you feel joyful in your Judaism too, right? Like finding people who are like, I can think of a bunch of Jewish creators out there who post really fun content where you're like, Judaism is fun. Like it is actually a ton of fun. And there's so many cool things we get to do. So whenever I experience some of those negative comments or negative things in a news cycle, I just focus on the Jewish creatives out there who are like, Judaism's a ton of fun. If you want to join, like, if you want to have fun too, like let's braid challah on Friday. That's fun, and listen to music while we do it. So I think that that's one other thing that I would add to that. Just find people who are doing joyful Jewish things online. And that's, I think also is some of the best medicine. Don't they say laughter is the best medicine?
Yeah, definitely curating your feed for yourself. Like if someone makes you feel bad, don't follow them.
Yeah.
Even if they're your friend, so to speak, like your friends shouldn't make you feel bad. There's no need to follow someone that makes you feel bad, and then definitely follow people that bring you joy.
Yeah, like you bring me joy. I literally love when you post the Boker Tov Hamudim, and I'm like, hey. And I also have my coffee at that time, and I feel like we're having coffee together. And now you're like, wow, she's a stalker, but I'm not. I swear.
No.
But Amy, tell me about something that you're working on right now, where we can find you, and something that you are looking forward to in the next couple months.
The year just started, so I have a number of speaking engagements lined up in different places around America. So that's great. If you want to bring me to your community, you can just DM me on Instagram or go to my website, email me. You can reach out to me on Twitter too, but less fun. And you can find me on social media it's the Amy Albertson. So at the Amy, AMY, Albertson, ALBERTSON. That's my handle on Instagram and on Twitter. And my website is amyalbertson.com.
It's easy. It's simple.
Try to make it easy.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell me, because it is Shabbat, what are you having for dinner tonight as our last question?
Wow. I was at my parents' house for a couple of days and I just got back late last night. So I have not even actually thought about dinner, but my fiance will be home in probably an hour. So we will discuss and probably go to the store because I've been gone for a few days. So, but if I was having like my dream Shabbat dinner right now, I would probably make chicken soup because I can eat chicken soup all day, every day, and maybe fish of some kind. And I'm a big salad person. Like, it's not a lie. I'm like a rabbit. I could eat chopped up vegetables for every meal like soup, salad, and breadsticks is like my dream meal.
It's mine too. I belong at the Olive Garden.
I'm like soup, salad, and challah, and maybe some hummus.
Yeah, that sounds like my ideal meal. I might do the same tonight. So thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time and flexibility with getting together finally. And hopefully we can meet in person one of these days when I come back from Israel with Halva Kingdom.
Yes.
Kingdom. Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate it. And if anyone wants to learn more, please go check out Amy, give her a follow, and shoot her a DM if you listened as well. Thanks so much. Not Your Bubbe's Nosh is a part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network and is produced by Jew Folk Inc. For more shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast. If you've got questions, email me at micah@noshwithmicah.com.